Today on the Big Six in 60, the 76ers force Game 6 against the Celtics.
They didn't lay over or roll over. They didn't lay down. They didn't get rolled by this team.
The Knicks take a 3-2 lead on the Hawks.
Knicks take Game 5 in dominant fashion.
And the Spurs knock out the Trailblazers.
Been a long time coming, San Antonio Spurs fans.
This is the Big Six in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big Six in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big Six in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins.
The 76ers stayed alive last night with a big win over Boston in Game 5 to force a Game 6 back in Philadelphia. Mark Farzetta with Locked On 76ers breaks down the win.
Three big things about this 76ers win. One, the fight. They didn't lay over or roll over. They didn't lay down. They didn't get rolled by this team. I thought this game came down to the end of the third quarter. The end of the third quarter, it was haymaker after haymaker from both sides. You see the Celtics, they're knocking down threes. Jason Tatum's knocking down threes. You see Andre Drummond respond with a three. Then you see Tatum knock down a three. Then Grimes hits a three. Then Brown drives on Joel Embiid, who had just checked back into the game. Brown gets another 2 points that way. PG comes down, hits a three. Grimes hits a three. Tatum gets an easy lay-in. That one also on Embiid that put the Celtics up 86-82 in the waning minutes of the third quarter, waning seconds actually of the third quarter. And it was just haymaker after haymaker from both sides, two heavyweight bouts, two heavyweight fighters in a big bout, just punching each other as hard as they could in the face. And then just before the half, or just before the third quarter ended, Tyrese Maxey comes down, knocks down a three, the 7-3 of the quarter for the Sixers, and they're down just 1 point. If there was a turning point in this game, I think it was that series at the end of the third quarter and Maxey's three-pointer that put the Sixers within one. And then coming out of the fourth quarter, PG put the Sixers in front, and it was like, wait a minute, this could actually happen? And the Celtics, they just wouldn't go away. Even though the Sixers would be in the midst of a 14-3 run, the Celtics just wouldn't go away. PG hits the three right out of the gate in the fourth quarter. Joel Embiid knocks down a jumper. They go up 4 points. Then Hauser responds with a three. Embiid responds with a jumper. Maxey gets a driving layup in the next possession. Hauser hits another three. The Celtics just wouldn't go away. And then finally, after what was, I thought, a moment where, oh, great, now this is the moment it all falls apart. Tyrese Maxey just dribbled the ball out of bounds. Just flat out lost it. And I thought at that moment, this is where things are going to turn around. And Jason Tatum rises up to shoot a three down the other end off the Maxey turnover and misses everything but maybe an inch of the backboard. Overshoots the rim. And I went, breath of fresh air. Then Grimes gets the 3-for-3 foul shots after being fouled at the top of the key on a three-point attempt. Embiid comes up with a fadeaway. Embiid comes up with a layup. Maxey gets his 10th rebound of the night and then takes it down the other end, essentially coast to coast, not for a slam, but for a baseline jumper, and knocks that one down to make it 106-94. And it was like, they're going to do this. There's going to be a Game 6. The Sixers are going to be hosting that. And I hope we hear, we want Boston. I hope so. I hope we hear it again. But the number one thing, and officially, let's talk about
time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Turning point of this game was at the end of the third quarter when the haymakers were being exchanged. Now, player of the game is something else.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
This is odd. Joel Embiid, 33 points tonight, battling his way back from the appendectomy, as we talked about. 12 of 23 shooting, 0 for 5 from 3. Now, here's what's interesting about that. I caught a little bit of his post-game interview where he said in the first half he wanted to come out and he wanted to shoot threes. Well, that wasn't working, so they make an adjustment. All of a sudden, he becomes a screen man at the top of the key. He becomes a guy that's going to play a nice little two-man game with Tyrese Maxey. That works beautifully. If you listen to Locked On 76ers earlier today with Keith Pompey, that's one of the things I wanted to see from Joel Embiid, to see that two-man game going. He starts taking more bunnies than anything. Starts going to the foul line more often. He's under the basket a hell of a lot more often. He made himself a hell of an adjustment. But how about this? 33 points. Yay. 4 rebounds. Boo. 8 assists for Joel Embiid. Hell yeah. Love seeing that. How about this? If I were to tell you ahead of tonight's game that Joel Embiid was going to out-assist Tyrese Maxey, and then in turn, Tyrese Maxey would out-rebound Joel Embiid, I think you would have looked at me and said, you're crazy. You are crazy. But that's exactly what happened. So if I had to go with a player of the game, it would be Joel Embiid. But right after that, it is Tyrese Maxey. Embiid, again, 33 points, 8 rebounds, or 8 assists, 4 rebounds. Tyrese Maxey, 25 points in 43 minutes on 10 of 18 shooting, 3 of 10 from beyond the arc, 10 rebounds, 5 assists in this game, 2 turnovers. Just 2 turnovers in that one. All his rebounds coming on the defensive end. Maxey was all over the place tonight. And I know people knock his defensive ability. What he lacks in standard, when you're one-on-one guarding a player, what he lacks in that, he makes up for with quick hands and just trying to force turnovers in that regard. And tonight, I thought Max did a great job of that. In total, he had 2 steals. But what we've talked about with him as a defender is if he can come over and help and be a bit of a disruptor, then that's where he can shine and also force turnovers and also get steals. And that's what he did tonight, especially in the second half. So I love seeing that from Tyrese Maxey. So player of the game, number 1, obviously, you got to look at Joel Embiid and his performance tonight overall. And then you also have to look at Tyrese Maxey and what he brought to the table. The one thing that has really been missing from this Sixers team, and I actually took note of this in the second quarter. The Sixers bench at the 7:18 mark in the second quarter, the Sixers were being outscored in bench points. Ready for this? Boston Celtics 17, Philadelphia 76ers 0. Nothing. Nada. Zero. Okay? 17-0, they were being outscored. They hadn't even scored a point off the bench. And then this man who we've been talking about, Keith and I have been talking about really over the last 2 months, who has just kind of gone away, Quentin Grimes, just disappeared, has done nothing, has come up very small for this basketball team. I mentioned how in Game 4, you saw a little bit of conviction from him, a little bit more aggression, shooting a 3 a little bit, things were looking okay, like a little bit like he was getting back to his old self. Well, this is the best version of Quentin Grimes that you could really hope for. Quentin Grimes, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and even before I'll mention Paul George tonight, I'm going to mention Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes comes off the bench to get you 18 points and was absolutely money in that third quarter, knocking down a 3 that made it a 2-point game, 84-82, and then coming up in the fourth quarter, getting an N1 situation, unable to convert it, but getting an N1 situation to help the squad, or excuse me, the 3 for 3 that he was from the foul line on a 3-point attempt that he had at the top of the key that I mentioned earlier. And then the defense he played on Jaylen Brown around 6 minutes to go in the game was unbelievable. I mean, you got to watch it. I mean, the Boston fans were screaming, oh, foul, foul, foul. But it was just good, hard-nosed defense. It was good, tough defense. If Jaylen Brown 75% of the time can get away with like elbowing a guy in the chest, pushing off, then I think Quentin Grimes can get away with some hard defense. And he wore Jaylen Brown out on that particular play. And if you haven't seen it, it's not going to be in the box score. It might not even get mentioned in any of the outlets. I'm mentioning it now because, kids, that's how you play defense. Quentin Grimes all over Jaylen Brown in that situation. Jaylen Brown's it's taking every ounce of his energy to get the ball across the court. Grimes is D'ing him up around the foul line. Jaylen Brown rises up for a jump shot. He looked like he had 0 energy left in the tank when he actually got to the shot attempt. And Quentin Grimes just stood there. Clank. Missed it. Short right side of the rim. That was great defense by Quentin Grimes, and it helped the Sixers maintain momentum and also continue to build, featuring, really starring, a 9-0 run, later became a 12-0 run, and in the process, the Celtics missed at least 12 shots in a row. That's terrible.
The NBA playoffs are here, and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. I like using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right there in one place. You can check stats, trends, and matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. It's a really easy app to navigate, and it makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. The Knicks rolled past the Hawks with a 29-point Game 5 win to take a 3-2 lead in the series. Gavin Shaw with Locked On Knicks recaps it.
After seemingly being on the brink, now the Atlanta Hawks are on the brink. The New York Knicks take Game 5 in dominant fashion, a 126-97 victory over the Atlanta Hawks. And we're going to talk through the return of the captain. Jalen Brunson goes off in this one. Mike Brown cooking on his rotations, on his lineups, everything but the starting lineup worked really well. And we're going to talk about the Knicks' talent advantage that you and I were very convinced about coming into the series is starting to shine through.
I mean, you said it all. Lots of brinks. Knicks were on the brink, and the Hawks were on the brink, and then the Knicks were on the brink, Jordan Brink. But at the end of the day, the Knicks are going to win this series. Man, I'm going to get a lot of heat for that. But it came out because I just think that they have got to a point where, yes, their talent is overwhelming, and they also realize that their talent is overwhelming. I think the Hawks have gotten to the point where we're not seeing anything else from them as far as adjustments. I expected some ghost coverage, some ability to pack the paint against the Knicks and slow things down, but they just didn't do it. Their big reveal for this game was putting Dyson Daniels on Karl-Anthony Towns. All right, well, that's all you guys got left. It doesn't seem like they have much. Knicks dominated this game in every critical stat, in my opinion, because it wasn't just the fact that they're more talented, but they're the more talented team who is also asserting their will. And at that point, I don't know what the opponent does. So that team's better than you, is also way more physical, is out rebounding you 48-27, is getting out on the break even more than you, even though that's your specific skill set, is what you're known for, is getting out on the break. You get 4 fast break points in a game if you're the Atlanta Hawks. You get blocked 6 times. The Knicks playing with more energy and effort, shooting the ball better, rebounding it offensively better. And then again, bottom line, the more talented team. Jalen Brunson playing up to his standard, as we'll talk about. Karl-Anthony Towns playing up to his standard, doesn't even need to take very many shots and is dominating the game. It's just, the bench coming in and doing their role. It's too much for the Atlanta Hawks at this point. And if they're not going to try something extreme and out there and just desperate, then they're just going to kind of agree to go down in this series the way that they have been.
Yeah, I think when I started to feel really good was when Jalen Brunson got that transition layup late in the second quarter. Knicks go up 59-37, and I looked, and the Knicks had not made 6 threes at that point, XJ. They had only taken 6 threes, and to me, that is a sign of all right, this is, again, something that will look bad if the Hawks come back and win the next 2 games in the series, but I'll say it, varsity versus junior varsity. And to me, that was where, coming into this series, I was wary of the Hawks, and as it turns out, I was right to be wary, and any team that can go up on you 2-1 in a series is in turn, without significant adjustments that were left on the table, capable of winning that series. But why I was confident the Knicks would ultimately win was they had 2 trump cards in their bigs, in Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson. And Atlanta, to this point, and to your point, especially with the refusal to have ghost coverage on Josh Hart, or even honestly, they could try it on Mikal Bridges at this point. They could try it on Jordan Clarkson, but with refusal to bend the numbers defensively, they just have nothing for those guys. Cat in this game, they tried Dyson Daniels on him, and that kind of deterred Cat from getting involved early, but luckily you had an aggressive Jalen Brunson who was willing to take up the weight. And then from there, Cat makes his first three like 6.5 minutes in over Jonathan Kuminga, and that Kuminga matchup that was such a kryptonite for Cat, and had the Hawks fans confident, had me a little bit nervous, and Cat has seemed to have solved that. And I mentioned it last pod, but like an adjustment to put him in the high post, and that got Cat comfortable, right? Because he had that back down into the spin move, flip in and one on Kuminga. Talks his to him after. That was awesome. But then from there, he starts like going to the post, and like Kuminga like literally just flopped, and Cat went right through him and dunked it. And the second that Cat is patient and he's not rushing on those, and for a year and a half we've complained about like Cat, like, oh, it's almost like an elephant and a mouse, and the elephant shouldn't panic and the elephant should stomp on the mouse, but instead the elephant panics and runs away, and that's Cat's not running away anymore. Like, he's going right at that. And we can get into Mitchell Robinson as well. Obviously, he was just a force, even more so defensively than offensively in Atlanta. Again, given no Jock Landale, I don't know how much of a difference he would have made, but it's so easy for Mitchell Robinson when Tony Bradley's in the game, because he just, like, between him and OG Anunoby, you have two all defense caliber guys playing free safety. And the Hawks are trying to bait the Knicks bigs into mismatches, and over again they're switching and shutting down CJ McCollum, shutting down Jalen Johnson, and on both ends of the floor, your bigs are completely dominant. But you get to this point where Atlanta can't fudge the numbers defensively or crunch the spacing by playing the right lineups. And I think for the second straight game, and maybe even more so than in Game 4, outside of the starters, every other lineup Mike Brown played almost to a T. Was maybe you could pick an issue with Josh Hart playing with Mitchell Robinson at times, but by and large, like I thought he just played this perfectly, and tactically, like in terms of some of the sets the Knicks were running, he played this perfectly. And if the coaching's going to be even in the Knicks' advantage, like that talent gap is just going to shine through.
Yeah, I think tactically he was very, very good and did a lot of great things. Lineups were very, very good to excellent, probably. I mean, a couple of nitpicky things you could have, but I think overall, definitely excellent. For my money, he completely outcoached Quinn Snyder. I just don't think Snyder's willing to do some things. I feel like as the underdog, it's really upon you to take major risks to try to bend the talent gap back in your favor through using variance and using luck factors and pulling out all of those stops. And I haven't seen him go to that, just kind of hoping that his team wins. They won a couple games by 1 point. I don't think that really means that he's done a great job per se. If I was to nitpick, because we're going to give Brown a lot of credit, if I was to nitpick some stuff, I think early on when we saw Towns being guarded by Dyson Daniels, I immediately was like, put him in the post. What is he doing out on the perimeter? Why are you playing him like Okongwu was guarding him? Put him in the post. And we saw, a few possessions later, Towns gets Dyson Daniels in the post, and immediately Nickeil Alexander-Walker comes over to double team and ends up in a wide open Josh Hart 3 that he doesn't take, dribbles a couple times, and then takes a pull-up 3 that he makes. The classic, I don't want to take this open one. Let me dribble first for a few, wait for the closeout, and then I'll shoot it and make it. So that's the classic, Josh Hart. But I just thought that could have been cleaner in that situation where, Quinn Snyder's like, I'm going to put Dyson Daniels on Towns because I'm going to make it harder for him to make all of these great passes. I'm going to have Dyson Daniels be able to pressure up on him, and we're not going to have this blow by like when Okongwu or Jalen Johnson guards him, when Towns is able to just blow by and get all the way to the rim. And I thought it was a weak strategy that was easily countered, and Brown didn't really do it until the second half. Then he started putting Towns in the post, kept getting double teams, ended up with a corner 3 from OG in one situation where the ball got swung around the horn. Yeah. And then there was another wide open 3 that they got off that same double team action. It felt like anytime Towns had Dyson Daniels in the post, the Hawks were bringing like 8 different guys. I'm like, where are all these guys coming from? They're bringing their whole team to try to guard him. So the Hawks still had no answer for Towns. I think Brown could have emphasized it a little bit more, but it wasn't necessary in this game. They just had enough talent to overwhelm this team, and then when you get Jalen Brunson cooking like he did, it's just all she wrote. There's nothing left.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk more about Brunson, but he was the separator. And as we're going through this, and like I feel like we had so much emotion coming out of Game 4. We were discussing this pre-show a little bit. We were both a little muted, a little understated. Some of that might be the time of night, but I think the bigger thing was just because like this one, even to your point, without like optimal deployment from the get-go, like this one just never felt in doubt. Like Atlanta was shredding the Knicks, and we'll save the positive Jalen Brunson stuff for the second segment. I thought this was up there in the worst defensive games of Jalen Brunson's Knicks career, and the Knicks win by 29 despite that, because Atlanta had there was no offense outside of attack Jalen Brunson or put Jalen Brunson in the action and the Knicks blitz and you play 4-on-3 out of that. And I actually if there is a game 6 adjustment for the Knicks, I hope it's that they blitz less and they try to provide help from other spots versus just that early immediate panic when Jalen's on an island, right? Because that Atlanta that was the one big mistake for Mike Brown. I saw Atlanta was shredding that. And yet when you look at how efficiently they scored off of that, there was just nothing else that they had, to the point that very late in this game, until a late Jalen Johnson bucket, Dyson Daniels was their leading scorer. And that's awesome for Dyson Daniels. But if he's their leading scorer, things are not going well for the Atlanta Hawks. And they really they had that and a little bit of Nickeil Alexander-Walker shooting threes in transition, shooting threes off of inbound plays. But there was what else did they score on in this game? They're just out of solutions on the offensive side of the ball. And a big part of that is that the head of the snake is cut off with CJ McCollum and no one else is really stepping up for them.
Yeah, and one team was ghosting and one team wasn't. I mean, the Knicks leveraged Dyson Daniels' lack of shooting so beautifully on many occasions. I'm just they weren't even starting off with just Towns on him, but they were just rotating off of him. And then the ball would swing around and inevitably ends up in Dyson Daniels' hands and he's standing by the 3-point line. And a couple of times he shot and made them, but most of the time he's what do I do now? And it's well, we just played you perfectly and now there's nothing for you to do. The shot clock's running down. So I thought that was incredible. The defense for the Knicks was incredible. The Hawks basically put 1 to 2 non-shooters on the court at all times, sometimes 1.5 if you think about the way that Jalen Johnson shoots, which he feels like such a rhythm shooter, and he only shoots in particular situations confidently, and others he doesn't like to. So they basically always have guys that you could kind of rotate off of and leverage to collapse the paint and not be penalized for it. And the Knicks have been playing that perfectly. So I think it's been a great job, and it does feel to a point, I to your point about it feeling sort of muted. It just does feel like the Knicks are inevitable in this series and have realized that themselves, and they're playing to that level.
Yeah, I mean, you let OG Anunoby functionally with the way the matchups have been rejiggered, play free safety for stretches in this game. It's lights out. And when anytime the starting lineup is bad, anytime Tony Bradley's in there, the Knicks just ignored him completely, and it felt like it was literally 5-on-4. It did not feel like Tony Bradley. Tony Bradley existed as a ghost out there. He was the ghost in ghost coverage. There was nothing to do with him. He was Danny Phantom, and the Knicks just OG Anunoby blew up so much stuff. Mitch blew up a lot of stuff.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. The Spurs closed out the Trailblazers with a big win in Game 5 to advance to the second round. Casey Vieira and Devin Brown with Locked On Spurs talk you through it.
Evening in the Alamo City that's been a long time coming. San Antonio Spurs fans, they've been waiting for this. They've been waiting for this moment. It wasn't particularly easier, certainly a lot tougher than it should have been. But ultimately, the numbers read on the right side of things. The math evens out, and the San Antonio Spurs are moving on to the second round for the first time since 2017, my friend.
Absolutely. It's that time of the season. Everybody's got the Fiesta hangover, and we're just going to continue the party. The Spurs did their job tonight. Casey, let's have a great show. Let's get into it.
This is what you'll be talking about.
All right, so there were some aspects of this first quarter, really the first half as a whole, where it felt like the Spurs were just a continuation of what we saw in Game 4 with such a dramatic turnaround into the second half, and they were going to make short work of Portland. It was going to be an easy day at the office, and it felt like that through the first 24 minutes of play. They opened the game on a 17-4 run. They're up by 12 at the end of the first quarter. They opened the second quarter on an 18-4 run. All of a sudden, they're up 26. They shoot 67% in the field, from the field in the first half. That's the best number of the season. They're clicking on all cylinders. They're up by 20 at the break. And you're thinking, all right, that between what we saw at the end of Game 4 and the second half of where they're at right now, the Blazers are just here to participate because they have to, right? They showed a graphic on ESPN. They said from the second half of Game 4 combined with the first half of Game 2, San Antonio had actually outscored Portland 118-80. over those two games. But that would not be the case entirely, because despite going down 20 in the second half, despite trailing by 21 heading into the fourth quarter of play, Portland fought back. Portland battled. It didn't matter that Victor was not necessarily himself on the offensive end up to that point.
Right.
It didn't really matter that they weren't playing the guys that got them to them. They mixed in some unfamiliar names, some familiar to Spurs fans. One of them was a former Spurs draftee in City Sissoko. But the Blazers get back within 9 points in the fourth quarter with 8 minutes to go. But something that's really the dynamic that Spurs fans have been waiting for in these high leverage games in these spots is when things get tough, they have a guy to close things out, and that's De'Aaron Fox. We saw it in game 4. He put the thing away in the fourth quarter. And tonight, once it got back within single digits, De'Aaron Fox does it again. He has 11 points inside the final 6 minutes of work. San Antonio goes up 20-plus by that point to stop the rally, and as a result, the Spurs are moving on 114-95. His stat line reads 21 and 9 assists, 13 in the fourth again, 11 inside the final 6 minutes. Victor with 17, 14, and 6 blocks, 2 of them inside that final 5 minutes that were just ridiculous. He blocked one over the backboard. He sent it over the backboard. That was nuts. Collectively as a whole, the Spurs shoot 55% from the field. But the important number is that it's 4 wins for San Antonio, 1 for Portland, and it's off to the second round.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked about it in a squad show. When you're approaching a game 5 and you're on your floor, you just went and got 3 and 4. They did their job. Game 5, they did their job. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Casey, but I believe that was a franchise record for first quarter points. They came out on fire, and it continued into the second quarter. That's what you have to do. You have to let Portland know that you're not going to have a chance. Now, to Portland's credit, they fought back. Thiago mixed up the lineups, and like you said, some guys that we were not familiar with came in there and actually cut into the lead. They cut it inside 10. So now you're worried. All right, now you're worried. Are the Spurs going to be able to close it? De'Aaron Fox, wow, what a time to step up. Now, when I look at this, and I'm looking at it from Coach Mitch's lens, I've had Castle take over a couple of games. I've had Wemby put his imprint. I've had Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes, Juju be solid. And now I've had De'Aaron Fox and I've had Harper close out games. You can't be in a better position than the Spurs are in right now. Closing this out, now everybody can get healthy. All right, and you get on for the next round. Casey, I thought tonight was just San Antonio doing things like the first half and second half. They were out there, playing for the elements of just playing the game of basketball and playing it very well. Fourth quarter, and this is what I really loved out of Mitch, he milked the pick and roll from the top of the key with Fox and Wemby. And Casey, that's what took them home tonight.
More notables from the backcourt, like you said, Harper and Champagnie were strong tonight. Julian had 19, 5 of 7 from deep. Harper with 17 points off the bench, which was interesting because we talked so much about three guard dynamic with this team. Stephon Castle was rough this evening. He had 15, but he also had 7 turnovers, and he fouled out midway through the fourth quarter, I think right around the 5-minute mark. So there was still eternity left, and it was still a basketball game for sure. But as a result, that's the luxury of where they're at right now when they have that backcourt that's working, when they have things going for the betterment, and that's what they did. I think the thing that really impressed me with this, with the way that you look at it, people, right? You're impressed in their ability to run out and jump out to the advantage that they did going up by 26 in the second quarter. You're not crazy about, of course, the fact that it got within single digits. But when you look at their ability, their poise, and things like that, I really think, and when you talk about the playoff experience, what they learned in 3, what they learned in 4, really benefited them, in my mind, in Game 5. Because they knew the severity of the situation in those 2 games, 3 and 4, going down big. Portland, despite being at clearly a talent disadvantage, one in this series. They're physical and they were going to beat you up. and they were going to fight to get back into this thing. And they did that. And San Antonio withstood the run. And I think it's because of what you saw in the prior 2 games. I don't think tonight happens for De'Aaron if he doesn't pop off with game number 4.
Right.
Opinion for sure. It was a prime example, the way I saw it, of learning from your mistakes, learning how to grow and for the better. And they did that, and they did that when it mattered towards the home stretch of this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have to see it from De'Aaron's eyes, and Portland's doing a lot of switching, and all the matchups were in his favor. All right. Can't guard him with 4 and 5s. He's too quick for that. He's too smart for that. He was getting you to the rim. He was keeping you off balance with his hesitation. He hit a 3. Now you have to honor him stepping back, hitting more 3s, which allows him to get to the basket. So just a very smart, called game by De'Aaron from his eyes. And this is what I like. It was about 4 or 5 straight possessions. De'Aaron knows now, okay, for moving forward, that if you have it going, go. Nobody else is going to be upset at you. They want you to succeed. They want you to play like that. That's what you're supposed to do. So to see him do that for 4 or 5 possessions, call for the ball, get the ball, demand the ball, and just go and attack the defense, it was good. Casey, it was good because now the games are going to get bigger, and you're going to need him to do that more.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. The Wild beat the Stars 4-2 in Game 5 to move within 1 win of knocking out Dallas. Seth Tupol with Locked On Wild takes you through the win.
The Minnesota Wild pick up a 4-2 win over the Dallas Stars, and now they have a 3-2 lead in the series. And Alex, there was a lot to like in this game. Matt Zuccarello comes back. The Wild immediately score. He scores 3 and change into the game. The Wild scored a living, breathing power play goal. The Wild did not get critically caved in by the Dallas power play tonight. The Dallas Stars did not score a 5-on-5 goal. The Dallas Stars got caved in 5-on-5 play. Jake Ottinger can't defend the net to his stick side. There's a lot to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, how about this defensive effort on the road? Yeah, just unbelievable. Dallas has the advantage of being at home, last change dictating, matchups, and they just could not get into the inside. It's amazing effort. And then, to play almost a period and a half without Brodin, so you're down to 5 defensemen, just incredible effort by the D-core and Wally.
No update. I see we already have a question on the Jonas Brodin front. No update on Jonas Brodin's status, but he was pretty quickly ruled out for the rest of the game. I am going to assume that was hopefully largely due to being precautionary, but we don't know.
Who knows? I mean, with toes, it looked like he took a direct hit to his, to the, toes on his feet. So hopefully nothing broken. But yeah, when you're ruled out that quickly, it's either, precautionary or it could be a, big time injury, which then there's a whole strategy on what you want to do for game 6 there.
Cut him off. 26 blocks, as is being pointed out in the chat. The Wild had 26 block shots tonight. The Stars managed just 9.
McCarron had a huge one on that power play too.
Yeah. As you pointed out, though, it came down to the Wild attacking what have become weaknesses for the Stars team as this series has gone on. The Matt Boldy goal with Jake Ottinger's stick side, that has become a weakness as this series has gone on. And that is the only this, like a couple of years ago, this Wild team would never have been like, hey, there's a spot in this net that this goaltender can't really do anything about. Maybe we should attack that. But now the Wild have attacked that multiple times in this series. And the Boldy goal, you throw it over to that side of the net, it's 50-50 at best that Jake Ottinger is going to be able to do anything about it. And so the Wild get a goal there. Matt Zuccarello right on the doorstep off of a rebound. Tyler Myers was a Hindenburg level disaster for the Stars.
And Labushkin too. It's that Lundqvist injury is bigger than I think a lot of people realize. Because you got two guys that are basically pylons out there on the right side for Dallas, and just every time when they're out there, they're prone to make a boneheaded play. And I mean, the Wild capitalized on that first goal with Myers not getting it out of the zone, and they took advantage, and he was just a mess the entire game.
So many, like the Michael McCarron goal, just walking it up to the net and just stuffing it 5-hole on Jake Ottinger.
Just get it on net. You never know. This was Ottinger's worst game of the series. I mean, I think he should have had that Boldy goal too. It was he was way deep in his net, and he was just off. And like you said at the beginning, Wally's outplayed him.
Yeah, Ottinger is losing that battle on a nightly basis now, as far as the net goes. And, I know it was goaltender interference, but it's just so funny that goal that was overturned was essentially a Miro Heiskanen own goal.
Nothing was funnier than the last game where he kicked it in like a karate kung fu into the net. But yeah, too bad that he's had a couple get called back, but he had a beautiful one later in the game.
Yeah, we're missing a crucial part of the process here. Crucial part. I don't have my postseason pour. So I think what we should do here, why don't you go through, Alex, and just just list for the listeners. It'll take me 2 seconds. Just list for the listeners the players that were the biggest in this game, the players that had the biggest roles in this game. I just have to go grab all the stuff and I'll literally pour it right here. So just give the listeners the players that you thought had the biggest impact in this game for the Minnesota Wild.
Okay. Yeah. Kirill Kaprizov answered the bell tonight. I know there was, he's under pressure to start performing, and he gets Zuccarello back and has a 3-point night. That was huge. Michael McCarron with the game-winning goal had a huge block on the PK, like I mentioned earlier. Wally didn't really have to do much, but he came up big when needed. I thought Jared Spurgeon played amazing, especially not having Brodin. He had to pick up a lot of minutes defensively. So I thought Spurgeon had a great game. And then there we go. I like it. And what a difference maker having Zuccarello back. He scores 3 minutes into the game. Just amazing. Yeah, just an all-out team effort defensively. So kudos to the coaching staff for out coaching Dallas on the road.
Yeah, out coaching is a good way to play it because John Hines, there's been a lot of roster juggling in this series. John Hines, with the exception of Bobby Brink today, and I say today because I thought Bobby Brink has been pretty solid the last couple of games, but he had the turnover that led to the penalty. He had another turnover on the power play. I fully understand the decision to sit Danila Yurov because he's a young player in his first postseason action, and the faceoffs have been glaring. So I fully understand the decision and fully support the decision to sit him. I think he will either him or maybe Hunter Haight will be in for Bobby Brink in the next game.
Or they play Sturm on the wing, like they have before. Just because they want a veteran in there instead of a younger guy. But we'll see.
And I say today because, again, I think Bobby Brink's made some solid plays in this series, and it did not work out tonight.
No. You can't have those turnovers, and thank goodness his penalty didn't really. They got the goal, but it wasn't a factor in the end.
Through them here. Final game numbers here. The Wild, they outshot the Stars 28-22. And again, it was 25-11 going into the third period and into the third period. 11 shots on goal for Dallas through 2 periods of play at home in a game that 80-ish% of the time decides a series. In game 5, 80-ish% of the time it decides who wins the series, and they had 11 shots on goal going into the third period.
Look at those face-offs and the blocks. Yeah. Just incredible. They won the face-off battle. You can't say that very often, but that leads to possession and a heck of a defensive effort with those blocks as well. Just eating pucks left and right.
Yeah, and the Wild have gotten back to the part, like, this was kind of the theme in game 2 and a little bit in game 3. The Wild have gotten back to using the physical play to extend the zone time and to wear the Stars down. Like, 24 hits was one of the low numbers of the series so far for the Wild. Mm-hmm. But this was one of those games where it felt like the Wild they set up camp physically from the start of the game, and they did not back down.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Reports say the NCAA is moving toward expanding the men's and women's NCAA tournaments to 76 teams next season. Parker Ainsworth with Locked On Cougs get into what that could mean for the future of the sport.
The news of the day in college basketball, a sport where Houston reigns at the top, is that the field is expanded. The field of 68 is no more. The tournament that felt like 64 was technically 68 for oh so long is now going to be 76 teams. Pause to let you gasp. I know it's happening. Now, I do think that there are ways to sell and pitch this and whatever that sound great or sound like maybe not so destructive or whatever. So let's hit the nitty-gritty facts and details here, because I don't like this at all, but we need to at least explain what's happening, right? So the NCAA has initiated the final steps. I mean, they're passing it through the different committees, and they all have to sign off on the boards of this, that. So they're just passing the paperwork across to be signed now, but it appears that everything is on track to be finalized in the coming weeks per Pete Thamel of ESPN. It would even, according to the same report, go into effect as early as next season. The logistics things they're doing now are things but like who gets what TV games and some sort of renderings about where you'd have the games, because right now you've got the first 4 when you go from 68 to 64 being played in Dayton, and so you'd be like, okay, well, do we have some like East Coast games and West Coast games? What nights of the week after Selection Sunday could they reasonably happen to still have your 64 team tournament start on Thursday? Because I think that is the goal here, is for the TV audience, the tried and true tournament of 64, the round of 64 would still start on the Thursday. So how would you schedule these games in a staggered TV kind of fashion on a, an Eastern Seaboard, Western Seaboard kind of thing, and still get that part of the week, big TV games in that part of the week, and still have your all day long 64 team round on Thursday and Friday, 32 team rounds on Saturday and Sunday, and have that weekend, that holy weekend of basketball where it's nonstop. How would you keep that going? Now, that means they're looking to add 8 teams here, and the addition of the 8 games would be a first round kind of play-in type of scenario if you couldn't figure that out, right? So the same way that you went from 68 to 64 by having like 2 16s play one another 2 different times, having 2 11s play each other 2 different times, you're just kind of adding into that, making like all the 16s play each other and making all the 11s play each other or whatever. And for the folks that haven't clued into this before, the reasons it's typically 11s playing each other is those are kind of the bottom of the barrel of the Power 4 or high major programs that make the tournament. They're playing their way in, whereas the 16 seeds are the bottom of the barrel or the lowest ranked teams that in general, right, making the tournament. So that's kind of why those are typically, right, you're playing games. And that's why that you're going to theoretically be adding more of those kinds of teams into this and get to have more playing games. I don't think this helps the little guy, though, as much as they're going to sell it. They're going to sell this to you as adding more teams, adding more end of the whatever teams. And I just don't think, I I don't think it works like that, and I do not buy that. Last year's first 4 out per the committee were Oklahoma, Auburn, San Diego State, Indiana. That's 3 Power 4 teams, 2 from the SEC and 1 from the Big Ten, notably have big contract deals with some big TV market kind of companies, right? And then adding in San Diego State, who is, I guess, technically a mid-major, but was in the championship game just back in 2023, right? That's not exactly the little guy or anything like that. The next 4 out, because you're expanding this, 8 more teams, not just those 4, would have been Seton Hall, Cal, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. And while I love that for my Big 12 brethren, that is still adding, in basketball sense, all power teams, because Seton Hall is in the Big East, right? So again, you're not adding in an Akron or a Texas State or a UTEP necessarily. You're not adding in any of those caliber schools, adding in a second team from the MAC or a second team from the MEAC or a second team from anything like that, right? You're not really fixing the problems at all as far as adding more of those kinds of teams into this tournament. And Dan, it's going to be pitched to you as inclusion of teams that need a chance, but really it's just adding more mediocre big teams. And I just can't get behind that. Now, if you could tell me, you could write in some version of this pitch where you made sure that every conference had their regular season and tournament champion both make it in the case that those were different teams, okay, I could get behind that. You could potentially have 2 different teams from these smaller conferences both represent and have kind of capstones on what is incredible seasons for them, right? I think that's important to do, as opposed to just taking the conference champion totally blindly and not taking the Miami of Ohio. Well, now last year, Miami of Ohio did make it famously, but the concern with them about having to win their conference tournament was very real. After an undefeated season, there was a real chance that they would not end up making it if they did not win their conference. They finally did. Things went right, and they got that one right. But that felt circumstantial, right? That felt kind of meh, right? And so having to cross your fingers, even though they went undefeated in the regular season, because they lost to our man Delrico Gillespie and Kent State in the tournament there in the MAC, that I think had a lot of people holding their breath. Like, will they do the right thing, or will they only let Akron, who ultimately won that conference tournament, in? They did let both in, but having some insurance like that to expand the tournament, I could actually get behind, because both Akron and Miami of Ohio and those kinds of teams across a bunch of smaller conferences deserve to be in. And so I could see how that would be the deal. I don't need to see a bad Auburn team get in. I just don't. I don't need to see a bad DeVries Indiana team get in. I don't need to see Cincinnati fired their coach. I don't need to see a team without a coach get in the tournament, right? I just, those kinds of things don't do it for me. Now, I will say that this does, from a TV viewership perspective, add in fun, do or die, competitive games throughout the week. And if the goal is really to keep that holy weekend of Thursday, Friday all day, and Saturday, Sunday, the round of 32, if you can keep those intact, I guess I can just close my eyes till Thursday and open them up and act like nothing's ever changed in a lot of ways. But I just feel like this does shift things more than that. And frankly, for what it's worth, there's something to be said about how, like, last tournament, UT Austin got hot, so to speak, after a great kind of jump start to their tournament with the play-in game, right? I don't have enough data. There was not a whole lot of collected data on the round of 60, or the round of first 4 going into the round of 64, and like how it jump starts certain 11 seeds or whatever to getting a couple wins out of the way. But you had a mediocre Power 4 team that had a bunch of expensive transfer talent that didn't pan out. If they got a game or 2 to gel, they might actually win some games, and that ultimately be rewarding a team in March for having a really bad December, January, February. And look, call me old-fashioned, I think December, but specifically January and February, your conference games need to matter. Those are your like-sized, like-dollar, like-et-cetera teams that you're competing against, with all of the scouting reference data and all the different touch points and all of that. And that has to matter, right? And so rewarding a bad team that did poorly in that part of the season by giving them a chance to get hot before they get in the tournament doesn't really sit right with me either. Now, I really think part of this, though, if I'm being honest, does come from a point of privilege. Houston has the longest active Sweet 16 streak in America, right? I am not worried about Houston making the tournament in the knock on wood, near future. That's just not a real concern of mine. I do think that there's a way that this works out where in 16, 17, it would have been great for the Cougs, and now it's ultimately not.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Welcome back to the Big 3 in 30 college. Kansas landed number 1 recruit Tyron Stokes, giving Bill Self another massive win on the recruiting trail. Derek Johnson with Locked On Jayhawks lays out the impact.
Tyron Stokes is officially a Kansas Jayhawk. We're going to break down his impact to the team, what the roster currently looks like, what still needs to be done this offseason for KU, and we'll get into a little bit of a scouting report on Stokes as well. If you missed it, Stokes was on Inside the NBA on ESPN, had some interview questions, and then he pulls out a little, rectangular box-looking thing. And I started to, back in my mind, panic a little bit. I don't know if anybody else caught this, but it looked like Kentucky blue on the wrapping paper on this thing. He unwraps it, and it was not Kentucky. It was a picture, a card of himself in a Kansas uniform. He announces himself that he will be attending the University of Kansas. This was another Bill Self Spring Bill masterclass that we are talking about here, right? This is in line with, Andrew Wiggins and, Peterson was obviously a huge addition for KU, but he was not a spring addition. I know this one didn't work out, but Sheck Diallo at the time was a huge addition for KU. Whether it was Hunter Dickinson from the transfer portal, Bill Self has been able to come through with the big name in the spring so often. And all this talk about the relationship with Bill Self and Tyron Stokes and him wanting to coach Tyron Stokes and coming back for another year, and the idea that he went to Rainier Beach, which was coached by Jamal Crawford, who was coached by Curtis Townsend when he was in college. The relationship won out here. Now, it sounds like KU was able to pony up and be able to meet the amount of money that they needed to get. So you credit, the donors and Travis Goff. And I certainly heard a fun story about what a donor did in writing a check for Tyron Stokes. And they were able to meet those things, and the relationship of Bill Self and the staff won out. This is a gigantic deal because KU's roster, while I really liked the Leroy Blyden edition, a stud, I love the Keanu Dawes edition. I like that you have Cole Rosario and Paul Mbia back. I like some of the freshman class. It is an incomplete roster without a star on it. And you now have that star with Tyron Stokes. And here's the perfect example of how important this addition is for KU, right? Because this to me is an offseason and season saving move. Without KU without Stokes on the roster, KU was ranked 29th before this decision on Bart Torvik. After the addition, they move up to number 10 in the country, right? And this is still with a handful of scholarships available to maybe move up even further. But you go from a team that is not a top 25 team on one site to a team that is now top 10. That's a Final Four contender, right? Shooty Hoops, which is a cool website that I've seen this year that I've been kind of playing around with, has a cool look and everything. Kind of the same idea. You can play around with the potential roster. They were 45th before this decision of Stokes. Stokes bumps them up to 22nd. And again, once you start adding a couple other players just to fill out the roster and rotation, it moves even further into the top 20, top 15, and so forth. So yes, this is the difference for Kansas between being a team that just, I don't know, I guess you'd be happy that the NCAA tournament got expanded to now one that you feel like has what it takes to be a Final Four contender. That's seriously what we're talking about here, because now you say, hey, we have Tyron Stokes. We feel like any given night we can have the best dude in the building. And then beyond that, you say, I like Keanu Dawes. I wouldn't love him if he was your second best player, but if Keanu Dawes is your third best player, that can work. If you have less pressure now on Taylon Kinney and Leroy Blyden coming in at the guard positions, you have less pressure at the center position. Let's learn a little bit more about Tyron Stokes' game, right? This is a player who was advanced from an early age. I think they were talking about on the broadcast how he got his first offer when he was in 8th grade. He goes to prolific prep for his freshman season where, he put up pretty good stats, 10 points, 6.5 rebounds per game as a freshman in high school. He was one of just 2 players that offseason to get invited to the NBA top 100 camp with AJ DeBonta, right? That's good company to be in. And then he goes to Nike Peach Jam. Again, this is just a freshman, or I guess it would have been freshman going into sophomore year because it's over the course of the I guess sort of summer. And he averaged 11.5 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.5 assists per game on 51%. Then going into his sophomore season, he goes to prolific prep with AJ DeBonta, averages like 13 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists per game. They go to the Chipotle Nationals. He was a sophomore All-American, also freshman All-American. And at the Nike Peach Jam, he goes for over 20 points per game, 9 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game. He ends up going to the final for the under 17, where they lose to the team with Cameron Boozer, Caden Boozer, Caleb Wilson, like a very loaded team. But those guys were all a year older than him, obviously. He had 22 points and 9 rebounds in that loss, so really showed what he can do against elite level competition. So then he goes to Notre Dame High School back in kind of my neck of the woods in Sherman Oaks, California for his junior season. He ends up having wrist surgery one year, comes in later in the year, puts up really good stats. You're talking 21 points, over 9 rebounds, almost 4 assists per game. He has a little football highlights in there too, which is certainly cool. And then he goes to the Nike Peach Jam and leads everybody at the Peach Jam with 10.4 rebounds per game. He was second among everybody in points per game, right? Then he goes and gets MVP at the Slam Summer Classic with 27 points. Then he gets kicked off the team. So I don't know if it kicked off the team or kicked off the school would be the right way of putting it. So there is a little bit of baggage here, right? Of I don't know if it was like a fight or what kind of led to it, but he ends up going to Rainier Beach, right? This isn't a legal issue that you have in the background. It's an unfortunate issue that happened at a school. And, that's something you're going to have to work on, but at least it's not like, again, a legal issue. So you end up at Rainier Beach, which again, you have the tie with Curtis Townsend and Jamal Crawford. And he just puts up unbelievable. I mean, you could constantly find stats where they're playing like teams that, it's a lot smaller, like little dudes who he's just destroying and just like toying with to score like 60 points. But he had an unbelievable season, even when he was going up against, better competition there. And now at the, the different circuits, I guess you would say, the all-star games, I guess you would say, performed pretty well. Played 21 and a half minutes in the McDonald's All-American game, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. That's a pretty darn good stats in 21 and a half minutes. Shooting wasn't totally there, but that makes it even almost more impressive where it's like, if the shot's falling, then what does it look like? And in the Jordan Classic, which isn't everybody from the McDonald's, All-American game, so it's not as good of competition, but he dominated 29 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 blocks. So looked really good there. The FIBA stats are really fun to look at here too. Because I think he's won like 3 gold medals. Obviously, they have the different classifications, like under 17, under 15, or whatever. So 2023, he plays for the under 16 team and averages 10.3 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 3.8 assists per game. And that goes on and on. And then like his last year in 2025, 9.7 points, 4.4 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game in the FIBA U19. And you're sitting there like, well, what's the big deal? Those numbers don't like jump off the page. Like that doesn't sound crazy. What if I told you he was averaging those numbers in 14.7 minutes per game? So meaning if you like extrapolated that out to playing 30 minutes per game against the world's best, he would have been averaging close to 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists per game in those situations. So yes, he was efficient shooting the ball as well as part of it. I've seen one comp that had him as like Caron Butler. I don't know that I totally get that. I don't know, because when I watch him, there's part of me that thinks the passing is the best part of his game, and that's what makes me so excited about this edition. We'll get into the fit with the roster and everything, but it just makes things a lot easier, I think, on everybody. This situation where, it's Darren Peterson coming in and there wasn't always the best meshing between the team KU had and Peterson with who's going to have the ball in their hands, who's taking the shots. I think there's going to be a little bit more synchronization by having Stokes because I think his passing is that good. I don't really know what the comp is, to be completely honest, because it is such a unique player. Like you're talking like 6'7", 230. I mean, here's some stuff from Adam Finkelstein, who does great work at 24/7 Sports. And you can go read the full blurb. I'm just going to take a few snippets from it over at 24/7 Sports. But mentions he has a 7-foot wingspan, powerful, long, explosive athlete, built like a forward, but he plays like a guard, has good footwork on the perimeter, good passer. It mentions that shooting is the biggest swing set or swing skill, but even acknowledges he shot 36% 30% from behind the arc on over 3 attempts per game. And that was as a junior. You go watch his highlights from his senior season. He's hitting all sorts of step back crazy threes. So I even view him as being a, solid 3-point shooter there too. The big thing is just, avoiding the issue that led to him leaving Notre Dame to go to Rainier Beach, right? Like avoiding those things is going to be the biggest key, and having that high motor on both ends of the floor at all time. Like those are going to be the biggest things here. But you're talking about an explosive power athlete who could realistically play the 4 because of his athleticism and body, but can basically play the point guard on offense because of his passing ability, driving ability. You can play him off ball a little bit if you want to get him an open 3 to get him a little bit of a breather on a play. Like there's a lot you can do with this.
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.